Now in total, right, we have covered 5 case studies in for national unity in Southeast Asia. Those of you who are hardworking, okay, and I think I've already printed for you all the readings, right? Yeah, there's a set of readings on national unity. Okay, if you're hardworking enough, you can actually bring in more case studies from other countries. Okay, no issues. Okay, that's good. Okay, but minimally, everyone in this cohort must master these 5 case studies, okay, that I've covered in lectures. Okay, so let me just address some of the questions raised by y'all. Some answers actually are more for your knowledge, okay, good to know, okay, but not necessary for exams, okay, but some will be very important, okay, that you must really know, okay, because it will affect the quality of the essays. Okay, so one question asked by this student, okay, why didn't Singapore become a Commonwealth realm? Anyone don't understand what is this question asking? Or rather, anyone understand what is this question asking? Anyone knows what exactly is this question asking? Why didn't Singapore become a Commonwealth realm?
Why didn't we become like Australia, Canada?
Okay, yes, very good. Actually, when I look at this question, right, I saw it in 2 ways. One question that the student may be asking is Singapore part of the British Commonwealth? Well, if this is the question, right, then yes, Singapore is part of the British Commonwealth. Okay. Now, this British Commonwealth, think of it as something like a gathering of the past British colonies. Okay. Yeah. But if you're talking about you're thinking in terms of Australia, New Zealand, or even Canada, right? In the sense that, okay, these Commonwealth nations, right, what they did was they adopted the British parliamentary system, okay, so with the Prime Minister, of course, but their head of state is not a president. Their head of state is the British monarchy, the British Queen. Okay, so I believe this question is asking, this student is asking why Singapore didn't adopt this approach. Actually, the answer is given by just now the student, right? Do you notice which are the countries that actually acknowledge the Queen of Britain as their head of state? Actually, it's mainly the Caucasian countries. Have you realized that? Okay, none of the Asian or African countries did that. Okay, so that's why, right, in a sense, this is also part of their nationalist credentials. Okay, obviously, as part of decolonization, there's no reason to continue to acknowledge the Queen as your head of state, correct? You rather have your own local leaders as the head of state. Okay, so this one, so that's the reason why Singapore didn't adopt that same system as New Zealand, Australia, Canada. Okay, so our president is our own people. Okay, not the Queen of Britain. Okay, this question answer. Okay, but this time more for your knowledge, not as necessary for exams. Okay, now this second question important. Okay, how effective is Singapore's shared values course? I've never heard of it before. Actually, fair enough. Okay, now those of you who have not actually looked through our lecture notes, you know that actually the government pushed out this shared values initiative in 1991. So this is actually meant to serve as Singapore's national ideology. Okay, but this national ideology, right? There are actually 5 principles to it. Okay. Okay, you can see in your Singapore lecture notes and the lecture slides. Okay. Okay, but there are 2 things that you must actually know about these shared values. First thing, although these 5 principles seems to be quite broad, but in fact, right, they are all derived from Confucian principles. So in short, right, the government was actually trying to introduce Confucian ideas, right, as national values. Okay, the national ideology. Okay, so that's one thing. So in a sense like that, actually reflects the cultural values of the majority ethnic group in Singapore, okay, the Chinese. Okay, but the other reason is because this is an initiative promoted by the PAP government. And you all know the attitude among Singaporeans, right? When the PAP government promote this sort of idea about Confucian principles about being obedient to the state, put the community above self, etc., right? Yeah, people see it as essentially just trying to force people to become obedient, justify the need for people to be obedient to the government. That's all. That's all right. generally the Singapore Shared Values Initiative, right, did not really catch on in Singapore. So that's why you notice, right, you have never actually heard the government leaders or anyone talk about the shared values. Okay, but actually it has not. It still exists. It still exists. I remember in my primary school, my exercise books at the back, right? Yeah, they are listed the 5 shared values. Okay, for national ideology. So it exists, but no one cares about it. Okay. So in a sense, if you talk about shared values effective or not, definitely not effective. But does it undermine our national unity? I don't think so. Correct? Okay. Okay, anyone have any other questions about this? Okay. Now let me okay. Now for the purpose of the exams, right, I need to highlight that you better make sure that you master these 5 points, okay, very well, okay, for your exam questions, okay, in terms of the concrete factual knowledge that you need, okay, to prove, okay, rather to substantiate your arguments regarding all this. Okay, in total, right, by now all of you should know that there are 2 main approaches, okay, assimilation versus multiculturalism. Okay, and when we talk about assimilation, right, okay, I realize, right, this is why you must also remember how do you actually define assimilation properly. Actually, in terms of assimilation, right, what we are saying is that you are essentially imposing, right, the culture of the dominant ethnic religious group on the minorities. Okay, so you are using the culture of the majority group as the basis to forge this new national identity. And the fact is, right, in Southeast Asia, all the countries that you see, right, are new countries. They are all new. Okay. Now this idea I need to really emphasize to everyone. Some of you may argue that Burma and Thailand, right, exist historically, isn't it? Okay, the Burmese king, okay, the Burmese kingdom, the Thai kingdom, it's true. Okay, but in this historical classical periods, right, although it is a Burmese kingdom, but the minorities, right, who are part of this kingdom, they do not see themselves as Burmese. There's no such idea as Burmese, okay? They are subjects of they pay tribute to the Burmese king, for instance, but they do not call themselves Burmese, okay? They continue to regard themselves as Shans, as Karens, okay, as Chins, Kachins. So they have their separate, unique identity. They do not identify themselves with the Burmans, okay? The only link between them and the Burmese kingdom is they pay tribute to the Burmese kingdom so that the Burmese kingdom don't disturb them. That's all. Okay, so that's all right. When we talk about the modern idea of a nation state, right, actually it is an entirely new idea. For the first time, right, in being part of this new nation state, you cannot say that you have nothing to do with the central government. Cannot, because the central government will want to control you. Okay, so that's why, right, because of this new idea of a nation state that is, of course, derived from, come from the Europeans themselves, right? You need to find a way to integrate everyone, okay, so that they can embrace this new nation state as their homeland. Okay, so that's why this is the context you must understand about national unity. Okay, no government can ignore their minorities and let them just go their own way. Cannot. Okay. So in this respect, right, these 2 main approaches, I hope you all really must understand fully. Because if you do not understand these 2 approaches, right, your entire essay, right, there's no way you can pass any of your nationality essay. Okay, this is the 2 most important approaches that will guide all your essays. So multiculturalism in that sense, right, as opposed to assimilation, is rather than favoring any group, right, you accord this idea of a cultural equality across all races and all religions. Okay, that's multiculturalism. Okay, and here, right, I want to stop for a while and make sure that you actually understand. Actually, I went through this with my AO2 class, and I want to also make sure all of you know. In this world, right, can you tell me, is assimilation or multiculturalism the norm in this world when it comes to national unity approach?
No.
Which one? Is assimilation the norm or is multiculturalism the norm?
Assimilation.
Why? Why assimilation?
Because nationalism.
Huh? Because nationalism? You mean multiculturalism? You cannot have nationalism?
It's more easier to create nations when your country is homogeneous.
With more what?
More homogeneous.
Oh, but most countries are not homogeneous. In that case, how do you use assimilation? Actually, the whole purpose I want to ask you all this question, right? Because almost all of you here are Singaporeans. The fact is, right, your experience, right, as a Singaporean, you must understand that it's a thoroughly unique experience in the world. If you look at Singapore, right, do you know how dominant is the Chinese population in Singapore? That's okay. The Chinese account for more than 70%. In fact, right, nearly 80%, 77% of the Singaporean population. This is not a bare majority. This is a overwhelming majority. And yet, this overwhelmingly majority population, right, did its best to downplay its culture, its religion, its language, okay, in the formation of a national identity. Can you think of any other country that does that? Are you able to think of any other country that does that? With a very, very clearly overwhelming majority population, and yet that population did its best to not use its culture as the basis for the new identity. Actually, I cannot find one. Okay, the only country.
US.
US, are you sure?
Yes.
Think about American identity. Okay, what exactly is an American identity?
It's a melting pot where all the multicultural races can get together.
Yes, and do you know, right, to qualify to be a US citizen, do you know what are the conditions you must fulfill?
Speak English.
Yes, is English a neutral language or minority language or wherever?
No.
Yes, the whole idea is actually the American identity is essentially based on this idea of a white, Caucasian, Protestant, Christian identity. Okay, there's a very clear dominant culture approach in this. And historically, minorities, when they want to be accepted as part of Americans, right, actually they do have to some extent orientate themselves towards this so-called ideal identity. Okay, so understand that Singapore is a very, very unique experience. Okay, the other country I can think of is East Timor. Okay, but this is a very stupid country. Okay, that they use Portuguese as their national language, even though no one speaks Portuguese. Okay, but that is a very weird example. Okay, but no other country I can think of resembles Singapore in this way. Okay, so understand. Okay, so let's continue on. Okay, yeah, so in starting for your different case studies, make sure you really cover all this properly. So you must know, for instance, our language. Okay, this one goes straight up, very fast, factually. What is our national language?
Malay.
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 Malay, yes. Okay, then what is the status of English?
Working language.
Working language, right? Important. So this one, I want to make sure no one, because if you dare to write this, English is the national language in your promo essay, right? Well, I confirm. Yeah, you will, yes, there will be implications, okay, for your essay. In what other ways do we show our multiculturalism, sensitivities towards other languages? What's the status of Tamil and Mandarin, for instance? Official languages, okay? In total, right, essentially, the very simple way you must remember of Singapore, we have 4 official languages, okay? English, Malay, Chinese, which is Mandarin, right? And Tamil, okay? Of which Malay is the national language and English is the national working language, okay? The official working language. If you don't really know what's the difference between national language and official working language, you can actually ask your tutors about it, okay? And as in Singapore, I hope we can see examples of how this is showcased, okay, in your daily life. Okay, ideology, I talked about the Singapore shared values, which is really a flop, okay? But religion, right, also very important, okay? Singapore, we have no national religion, okay? So we do not actually favor any religion. Although there's one religion that to some extent I can argue that it has some special preferential treatment, in a sense, Islam, okay? Because you know that it is only this religion that we have a Muslim affairs minister, okay, for it, okay, but that's also because of the recognition that the Malays, okay, are the indigenous group, okay, in Singapore, okay, which is also recognized in our constitution, okay, so that's why. Okay, therefore political representation, right, this one you must make sure you have the facts for all 5 countries. How are the minorities represented, or are they not represented? Okay, in Singapore, are the minorities represented? What system ensures their representation?
GRC.
Very good. GRC, so make sure you know all this, okay? Go make sure everything is in your notes, your handout, okay? The group representation, constituencies, guarantee minority representation, okay? So evidence of success and failure, I hope you all should find out, okay? Make sure you know all this, okay? How do you define success in national unity? Is it because there's no racial riots? Okay, is it because, give it, let's see. Okay, yes, okay, no racial riots. Okay, so that's one of the clearest indicator of success, okay? And when we talk about failure, right, you must also remember that actually Singapore, we did encounter racial riots in the past, okay, 64 and 69. And our national unity policies, right, just like in Malaysia, it is framed, right, in response to the experience of the racial riots, okay? Okay, right, okay, so anyone have any questions about Singapore? Ask now before I move on to another country. Okay, can everyone clear about Singapore? Okay. But that's it, right? And this is also one area that Mr. Ng likes to emphasize, and I do agree with him. Singapore example, right? In any Southeast Asia essays, can I request that you use it once, if possible, right? Maximum once, okay, in your essay. Okay, one case study of Singapore, that's all. Because I think about it, okay, if you're Cambridge, right, are you impressed with a student who give you multiple examples of Singapore as opposed to someone who can give you a wide variety of examples from different countries, okay? So for Singapore example, you can use it through, but try to keep it to one example in your entire essay, can? Okay, if no questions, let me move on. Okay, now, Malaya and Malaysia. Okay, now the reason why I need to differentiate between these two, right? Because you will realize that the national unity approach, right, under Malaya, right, was actually a lot more successful. Okay, partly because of the informal bargain. Okay, under the alliance government, actually, right, the Malayan racial situation was relatively okay. Although, right, you cannot say that it is harmonious, right, because generally the races do not work with each other. Okay, they generally avoided each other. Okay, but there was generally peace. Okay, yeah, no conflicts. It was only with the creation of Malaysia, okay, that the entire situation in Malaysia becomes complicated. Because in the case of Malaya only, there are only 3 main groups you need to contend with: the Malays, Chinese, and Indians. But when you created Malaysia, right, you added in Sabah and Sarawak. And these states, like these 2 states, have other indigenous people like the Ibans, okay, Kadazans, okay, Dayaks, etc. Okay, so you complicate the picture further. Then you also added in Singapore, and this PAP government, okay, these PAP leaders, right, they have a different idea to the Malay leaders, okay, the alliance leaders, okay. Instead of a Malay nation, they want a Malaysian nation, okay, where there's cultural equality, racial equality, etc. So this is where you see 2 directly fundamentally opposing approaches clashing with each other. And eventually, of course, Singapore will be kicked out because of this. Okay, so that's Malaysia. So this question asks, right, were non-Malays, right, okay, non-Malay political parties able to effectively represent and articulate the concerns of their respective groups, okay, given the dominance of the Malay party UMNO? Okay, actually, the question is, the answer I'll say is yes. Okay, because I remember after the racial riots, right, Malaysia's government system, right, was based on the Barisan Nasional. Essentially, right, this is a broad alliance covering all the parties that want to join the government. That means, right, as long as you win the elections, you are in parliament, right, the government okay, the UMNO, right, will invite you to join them in this Barisan national government. If you're willing to be part of them, then you can be part of the government. Okay, so with this, right, this ensures that all the elected, almost all the racial groups, right, are represented, their voices are represented in the government. And when we talk about the Barisan national government, right, it is in a sense an alliance. It is a real cooperation. So for instance, right, how does the BN ensure that there's adequate ethnic representation of the non-Malays? So for instance, right, in let's say in a district, right, where in almost all districts in Malaysia, obviously it is majority Malay, right? They may field a Chinese or an Indian candidate, okay, that represents the BN. So this Chinese guy would stand for elections in a Malay majority constituency. Ordinarily, he would definitely lose the election. But with the BN support, okay, they basically tell the Malay voters that, okay, this guy, okay, works, okay, represents the Barisan Nasional and therefore represents UMNO. Okay, so support him, vote for him, okay, as a representative of BN. And this is in a sense somewhat like our GRC system. Okay, so this sort of working arrangements ensure that the minorities are given guaranteed seats, okay, and therefore a voice in parliament, okay, based on this BN ticket. Cannot. Okay, so basically, just remember that in Malaysia, right, Barisan Nasional is made up of different political parties. It's an alliance, and the thing about Malaysia is almost all these parties are racial-based parties, are ethnic-based parties. Okay, they are not like like PAP cover everyone. No, they tend to be focused on a specific racial group or specific religious group. Okay, so with all these parties in BN, right, therefore it does ensure a diversity of a representation of their voices. Okay, in government. Okay. Anyone have questions about this? Okay, I hope my explanation for Malaysia is clear. Okay, so this is where we talk about the political representation for Malaysia, okay, for the minorities. Okay? Okay, then. Okay, language. Tell me immediately, what's the national language in Malaysia? Okay, Malay or Bahasa Melayu, correct. But I want you all to also remember when Malaya got independence in 1957, this one remember, actually for the first 10 years of independence, English and Malay, they were the two national languages in Malaya, okay, for 10 years. But of course, after 10 years, then Malay became the only national language, although English continued to be retained as an official working language. But this is different from Singapore. In Singapore's case, although Malay is the national language, but it is not actually used extensively in our daily life, okay? Whereas English is really a working language, okay, in our daily life. Whereas in Malaysia, right, when we say Malay is the national language, it is really the national language and the de facto working language as well. Everything is done in Malay, okay, with English used occasionally, okay? So know the difference. Singapore has no national religion. How about Malaysia?
Islam.
Okay, this one, make sure y'all don't confuse yourself. Islam is the national religion. But this one, I also want to highlight a very important point. Okay, this one. This is one of the very important characteristics of Malaysia that they keep emphasizing. Malaysia's national religion is Islam, but it is not an Islamic state. Who can explain to me what does it mean?
They don't enforce Sharia law everywhere.
Okay, they don't enforce or implement Sharia law, which means Islamic law. That means like the non-Malays, right? Okay, they are not subjected to Islamic laws. Okay, very important. But it's not just about not subjecting non-Muslims to Islamic laws. There's also a very important part. is a secular state. That means, right, for instance, I think of Singapore. Why are we a secular state? Our law system, right, is actually not based on religion. It's actually based on the English common law. Okay, so basically, you can think of it as something like a law system that is not based on any religious principles. Okay, so secular state. Okay, so even though, right, Malaysia does have Sharia law, the Islamic law, but generally Malaysia is run as a secular state. Okay, so there's a separation of religion from politics. Okay, so that is a very important part of the multiculturalism approach for Malaysia. Okay, so while they make sure that the non-Malays acknowledge that this is the Malay land, but they also make it very clear to the non-Malays that it doesn't mean therefore that your rights are deprived. Okay. Okay. Then of course the last two, same thing. Okay. You will notice that for Malaysia, just like Singapore, right, their last ever racial riots was in 1969. In fact, the 1969 racial riots in Singapore was not started by Singapore. Remember, this was a KL May riots. Okay, and these riots spread to the rest of Malaysia and spilled over into Singapore in 1969. Okay, so that was the last time both countries encountered racial riots. Okay, so you can say, based on this, you can argue that, yeah, seems likely that generally the nationality approach doesn't seem to be too much of a failure. Okay, relatively successful. Okay, but in Malaysia, right, okay, I want you all to go and check your Malaysia case study slides, the PowerPoint slides that I sent, okay, this week. They do have one very prominent racial incident, okay, in 1998, okay, in Penang, okay, but so this one shows the latent and underlying tensions, okay, in Malaysian society. But that said, right, you should also understand that this incident, right, is more of the exception, okay, than the norm, okay, in Malaysia. Okay, so this incident therefore doesn't showcase the failure of nationality, but it does show an isolated episode, okay, of ethnic religious tensions. Okay, so if you don't know about this incident, go back to the lecture notes and make sure you know this. Okay, so any more questions for Malaysia? Okay, no question. Okay. Okay, then let me move on to Indonesia. Now, Indonesia, I have a lot of questions. Okay. Am I going too fast? Okay. No issues for anyone, Okay. Okay, now, okay, Indonesia. Okay, so now let me just briefly go through, because I already done the live Zoom lecture, right, last week. Okay, so Indonesia should be quite familiar for most of you, especially those who didn't watch the Loom lectures. Yeah, so Indonesia is okay. So now let me address a few things. Okay, first thing, how important is the Garuda thingy to like other races? First thing, it's not called the Garuda thingy. What do you call it?
It's a Garuda.
What?
It's just a Garuda.
No. What do you call Indonesia's national symbol? You must be able to write the proper name.
Garuda Pancasila.
Okay, very good. Okay, this one I want to make sure everyone knows. The proper name for it is Garuda Pancasila. Okay, you do not write the Garuda or the Garuda thingy. So Garuda Pancasila. Okay, and then as you already learned from the last lecture, this is a Hindu mythical bird. Okay, so what is how do the other races, okay, in Indonesia react to it? Okay, I did say, right, at the start of Indonesia's independence, this symbol does not sit well with the Muslims in Indonesia. Okay, clearly, okay, this is a Hindu symbol. So obviously the Muslims are not happy. But over time, right, generally, they have tended to accept this. Okay, so actually today, right, you don't really see any vocal opposition to this idea of the Garuda Pancasila as Indonesia's national symbol. Okay, no. So I would say that Indonesia, they have generally embraced this idea of multiculturalism, okay, in their country. Actually, this is similar to like Singapore, yeah, Malayan. Okay, Malayan actually is a very neutral symbol. Actually, when it first came out, right, actually, Singaporeans are not very impressed. But today, it has become a rather beloved symbol, right? Correct. I think all of you like the Malayan, I hope. Okay, at least you recognize it as a Singapore symbol. Okay, if you go overseas. Okay, so Indonesia as a whole practices secularism, but like France and Singapore. Actually, I think, right, a better answer I should say is actually almost all the countries in Southeast Asia practices secularism. So that means like they separate religion and politics. I think the only country I can think of that does not actually practice secularism, right, is probably Brunei. Okay. Okay, under the House of Bokia, right, an Islamic monarchy, and actually Brunei now, right, is actually running on Islamic law, Sharia law. Okay, so actually, I think except for Brunei, the rest of Southeast Asia, we can say that they are secular. Okay, although for Thailand and Burma, okay, later when I talk about it, right, yes, they clearly have a very strong Buddhist influence there, but that doesn't mean therefore that they are not secular states, okay. Okay, can, right? So up till now, answers can. Okay, now this question. If Indonesia is more than 80% Muslim, right, why did they impose Islam as political backing to appease the majority? Okay. Anyone wants to give me the answer for this? More than 80% Muslim, then why didn't they use Islam as the national religion for that matter? No one knows. No one wants to hazard a guess.
Because many ethnic minorities in the outer island.
Okay, many ethnic minorities. For these minorities, can I say that they account for less than 20%? Would you care about the less than 20% minorities if you are the leader? Okay, how about this? Let me just give some hints. First thing, when we talk about Muslims in Indonesia, right? Are we talking about one coherent united group? No, what? Very good. Okay, I can see you all shaking your head. That is already a very good start. Okay, when we talk about Muslims in Indonesia, right? Okay, remember they are actually split into two main groups. Okay, the traditionalists versus the modernists. Actually, right, the Muslims are not united in Indonesia. Those of you who actually follow the news, right, you may hear of some of these major groups. Okay, so for traditionalist Muslim, right, just generally their biggest group is the NU. Okay, Nahdlatul Ulama. Okay, Ulama. Then modernist Islam, right, generally they are represented by this organization called Muhammadiyah. Okay. Yes, so these two organizations still exist, and they are two of the biggest Muslim organizations in Indonesia. Okay, so there's no unity among Muslims in Indonesia actually. Okay, they are actually rivals if you think about it. Okay, so that's one factor. Okay, they are not united. Okay, but second factor is also very important. Okay, and this will answer the question answer a subsequent question later. The role of leaders. Okay, you realize that actually leaders do play a very important role. Okay, in the face of vocal demands by the Muslims for Islam to be a national religion, Sukarno, Hatta, and even Suharto stood firm and refused to do it. So in a sense, you can also think of the role of Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore. Why didn't he introduce the Chinese language as the national language? Okay, why did he use Malay? Okay, why did he use English as the official working language? Again, right, there are many considerations motivating these leaders, but their role, you cannot deny, is very important. Okay, sometimes their decisions are made without popular support. Okay, in the face of popular demands. Okay, against popular demands, in fact. Yeah. Okay. So here again, this goes back to this question. Why was the topic of religion so sensitive? Okay, despite the diversity. Although we say that it's diverse, right? because if you look at it geographically in Indonesia, okay, so this is a map of Indonesia, right? Yes, geographically, eastern part is mainly Christian, then this part is Muslim. But even then, among these Muslims, right, there are different groups of Muslims. So it looks diverse. But actually, when you break it down into numbers, actually it's not really a lot. Okay, these Christians, they are spread over a wide area, but actually the numbers are actually not very big. Okay. And you must, again, the whole reason why it's so sensitive is because the leaders are recognize the danger posed by religion, okay, to undermining the country, okay. And there's also one very important reason why Islam has been marginalized under Sukarno and Hatta, okay. Never forget this thing called the Darul Islam Rebellion, okay. This rebellion actually happened before independence, okay, 1948-49, okay. And this Darul Islam Rebellion is actually directly challenging, okay, the Indonesian state, the secular Indonesian state created by Sukarno and Hatta. Okay, so actually you must also remember this context when you think about why was Islam undermined, okay, under Sukarno and Hatta and also Suharto. Okay. Now, why did they choose Malay and not other minority languages? Okay, because actually Malay, right? Now, Malay, first thing, it is actually an indigenous language, okay? Because over the centuries, centuries, some Malays have actually crossed over, okay, to settle in the coastal areas of Indonesia. So they are mainly Malay Muslim traders, okay? So over the centuries, they have actually stayed there, okay? So in a sense, Malay is a local language already, but the number of Malays in Indonesia is actually quite small. So they are a very clear minority, okay? Okay, clear minority, okay, in Indonesia, okay? So why did they choose Malay? First thing is a minority language. So therefore, right, other races, ethnic groups are more likely to be less uncomfortable with it, okay? And secondly, Malay has actually been a very popular trading language. So among the businessmen, right, in terms of trading discussions, right, business negotiations, actually Malay has been the de facto language used in Indonesia. And under Dutch colonial rule, right, actually Malay slowly became something like a de facto common language used by everyone in Indonesia. Partly because, unlike the Americans in the Philippines, the Dutch never promoted public education. So they didn't try to educate everyone in Dutch or what. So that means like they continue to speak their own languages. And because of this diversity, there's a need for human beings to find a common language to communicate. And over time, right, Malay filled in this role, okay, as a common medium of communication. So that's why after independence, okay, naturally Malay will become their choice of national language. Okay, and last question, yes, this one, okay. Which date should I use? August 45 or December 49? Which one?
Depends on the context.
Depends on the context.
49.
Okay, 49. But okay, when you say it depends on context, I need to be careful about this, because if you start to talk about context, then which time period do you start to begin with? Because if you think about it, right, actually Burma and the Philippines, the Japanese actually granted them independence in 1943. Yeah. So actually, if you based on context, actually Burmese independence can actually begin from 1943 already. Okay, so I think let's try to make it standardized. Okay, across all your Southeast Asian countries, we start from the formal granting of independence by the Western colonial powers. Okay, so that's our standardized time frame. So for Indonesia, therefore, we will use December 1949. Okay, correct. Okay, good. Okay, making very good progress. Okay. Then again, simple factor questions. I hope all of which by now should know that the language is Bahasa Indonesia, which is Malay, as opposed to Javanese. What is Indonesia's religion? National religion? Who can help me?
Islam.
No. Very important.
Don't have.
Okay, this one I want you to don't be confused. Malaysia's national religion is Islam. Indonesia does not have a national religion. And as I told you, right, I think Indonesia is the only Muslim majority country in the world that adopts this approach. And this choice of no national religion, right, is also motivated by its ideology policies, right? National ideology, which is Pancasila. Okay, so make sure you know Pancasila. Okay, Malaysia, right? Malaysia's national ideology is called Rukun Negara, which is in fact modeled after Pancasila. So you notice, right, Pancasila have 5 principles, Rukun Negara have 5 principles, and their principles are quite similar. In fact, actually, if you think about it, right, even Singapore's shared values have 5 principles. Okay, so I don't know why there's this trend. Okay. Okay, then last thing. Okay, now for Indonesia, right, your notes doesn't specify clearly what do you mean by political representation for minorities in Indonesia. Okay. Okay, I don't want to. Okay, I don't want you to give you all too much details to overwhelm you. I think, right, the best way I can say is, you remember that under Suharto's regime, right, you have the okay, under Suharto's new order regime, right, he allows for free elections, okay, under his rule, but only 3 political parties are allowed to contest these elections. Okay, so if you split up these 3, right, one will be Golkar, which is essentially the government and the military party. Okay, then you have the Islamic Party, you also have the Democratic Party. So this Democratic Party usually appeals to the non-Muslims, okay, who who see it as a secular party in that sense. Okay, so in that sense, right, if you look at Indonesia's electoral system, right, however unfair it is, to some extent, it does provide for the voices of minorities in government. Okay. And not to mention, Golkar itself, right, is actually a multi-ethnic and multi-religious party. Okay, it actually covers everyone. Okay, it does not favor it, and at least does not officially favor any particular ethnic religious group. Okay, Ken, Indonesia. Any other questions? Oh yes. Yeah. 3 more questions. This one important. Okay. Free Papua movement. Okay, remember there are total 3 prominent separatist movements. One in Aceh, one in Papua, and one in East Timor. And of course, the East Timor one succeeded. Okay, the only successful separatist movement in Southeast Asia that created a new nation. Okay. So why didn't the government or the media acknowledge more on the Free Papua movement? Simply because, right, unlike the case for East Timor or Aceh, right, actually the Papuans don't really have anyone, how should I say, fighting for them, okay, on the international stage. Aceh, right, in the first place, Aceh, I already told you that it's very rich in oil resources, okay, natural resources, okay, and it is a very strongly Islamic, okay, Muslim state. Okay, so actually it has the sympathies and support of even other Muslim nations. Okay, so in a sense, right, when Aceh's plight, right, tends to be highlighted by other Muslim countries. Okay, when they talk to Suharto. Okay, so in a sense, right, Aceh's the Aceh separatist movement has been quite prominently highlighted in the international media. Okay, due to the Muslim backing. East Timor. The one key reason why East Timor, right, remained a very prominent issue for Indonesia, right, it's also because of the role of his colonial master, okay, former colonial master Portugal. Okay, the Portuguese, right, were the ones who abandoned East Timor, don't forget. But after East Timor was annexed, right, it was Portugal who consistently and regularly, right, every year, right, they basically fought to highlight the East Timor issue to the UN. So that's why East Timor was never really forgotten. But if for the Papuans, right, who do you think can actually fight for them? Actually, the one who even created all these problems, right? Okay, with this that's laid the roots for the Papuan separatist movement, right, was actually the Dutch. Remember, Okay, if you don't know why, right, I want you to Wikipedia and find out more about how did this whole Papua thing come about. Okay, but the thing is, the Dutch were responsible for this. But the Dutch actually, after Papua became part of Indonesia, right, they didn't really bother about this issue. Okay, so that's why the Papuans have no international backing. So that's why actually no one cares about the Papuans generally. And the government also imposed a very harsh military rule, okay, in Papua, okay, to lock down all this, any news coming out. So why didn't Indonesia hold East Timor, right? Yeah, disagree with the UN. Yeah, a lot of factors, okay, but one of the biggest factor was by the late 90s, actually, Indonesia really was facing very, very, very intense and severe international pressure, okay, of East Timor. And don't forget, East Timor issue happened, right, in the context of the Asian financial crisis. And Indonesia's economy was in total collapse. So actually, the Indonesian government don't have much bargaining power, okay, to hold on. Okay, at that time, they were actually relying on emergency loans from international aid for the economy. Okay, and lastly, okay, Free Aceh movement and Free Papua movement, do we regard them as the same point of minority unhappiness or separately? Actually, for the purpose of essay writing, right, generally, you can just put them together collectively, okay, as examples of minority unhappiness. Of course, if you really want to differentiate even further, right, you will realize that actually the Free Aceh movement, right, they are essentially Muslim Acehnese, okay, they actually belong to the majority religious group, okay, whereas for the Papuans, right, they are Christian Papuans, okay, they are a religious and ethnic minority, okay. So if you can see this distinction, right, then you can think about how do you want to intelligently make use of these two case studies. Okay, any other questions for Indonesia? Okay, if not, right, then very good. I can, okay, I'm going to go, okay, only a few more, okay, 2 more key topics and that's it for today, yeah? Okay, now Burma and Thailand, just make sure you also, based on what I've already talked about, right, make sure you know what are the points that you need to ensure it is written in your revision notes, okay? Burma and Thailand, okay, these two are very clearly assimilative countries. They definitely try to impose the dominant culture, okay, on the minorities. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they are a failure, because especially for Thailand, right? Actually, the Thais, right? When we talk about the dominance in Thailand, it is very, very dominant. Okay, the Thais themselves, right? The TAI, right? The ethnic group itself, they account for more than 80% of the Thai population. Okay, that's one thing. But when we bring in the Buddhists, right? Actually, right, more than 95% of the Thai population are Buddhists. So actually, when we talk about Buddhism as a unifying symbol in Thailand, right? Actually, it makes sense for Thailand. Okay, there's only the less than 5% Malay Muslims in the south who are opposed to this. Okay, so that's why when you think about the different countries, when they use assimilation or multiculturalism, also think about their local circumstances and contexts. Okay, okay, very good. Last 5 minutes, I can just wrap up this whole thing. Okay, now I realized that a lot of you are quite interested about the treatment of the Chinese in Southeast Asia. Okay. Okay, so why did Southeast Asian leaders with Chinese ancestry, right, did bad things to their fellow Chinese people? Okay, so these are all these leaders with Chinese blood. Actually, if you think about it, the Thai monarchy, including King Vajiralongkorn, the king, right, who actually talk about the Chinese as Jews of the East, actually they all have Chinese blood. Okay, so why, in this case, why do they do bad things to the fellow Chinese people? Okay, one thing, of course, okay, there are actually 2 reasons. One reason is they no longer regard themselves as Chinese. They have actually regarded themselves as part of the indigenous group already. Okay, it is really thorough assimilation. Okay, that's one thing. And the other thing is for political reasons. Okay, the Chinese are a very, very convenient political scapegoat. Okay, to use. Okay, to rally the nations. Okay. Anti-Chinese feelings tends to be the norm, okay, in history, okay, in Southeast Asia, because of the very prominent economic success of the Chinese, okay, in as compared to the relative poverty of the local populations. So that's why they are a very convenient scapegoat, okay, to target. Okay, therefore use them as a basis, right, to therefore rally the country around these leaders. Okay, so that's one very simple reason. So how are the Chinese unfairly treated? Okay, in your slides you already see the different measures adopted by Suharto, right, to discriminate against the Chinese. Okay, like they cannot use their Chinese names, they cannot use Chinese characters, no Chinese schools, no celebrations of Chinese festivals. Okay, all these things are very clear cut. But that said, I also don't want you to get this impression that under Suharto, the Chinese suffered very badly. Actually, not true. Because despite all these measures taken by Suharto, right, he actually gave the Chinese much economic freedom to continue operating their businesses and contributing to the economy. Actually, it was under Suharto that many of the Chinese became very wealthy. Okay, so don't really so don't think of it as it's a one-way street that it is. Therefore, the Chinese suffer horribly, okay, because of all this discrimination. Just like in Thailand, right? Actually, people also discriminated against the Chinese, okay, very clearly. But the Chinese adapted to it, they assimilated to become Thai, and they became as influential and as powerful, okay, as ever. Okay, now this one is a very important thing. Please do not write this. You learn that the Indonesian Chinese are filthy rich and they own 70% of Indonesia's wealth. Okay, that's nonsense. Okay, remember this is actually a fallacy. It's really a myth. There's no factual basis to it. And the worst thing is Suharto himself was the one who actually created this myth. Okay, because as a leader, he publicly said this. Okay, that's why this myth stuck in people's mind. But actually, right, it is not true. Okay, so this is not a factual claim. The only thing, if you want to use it, right, you can say that this was actually mentioned by Suharto in 1968, okay, in a public speech. This one can, okay. So factually, this is true, but this statement by itself is actually not really true, okay. Although the fact about Chinese economic prominence in Indonesian economy, well, that one is definitely true, okay. Okay, how do you use the Chinese as case studies for essays, right? Okay, and of course the Indians also are. Now, usually when you talk about Indians, right, you mainly talk about them in the context of Burma. Okay, it is only in Burma where the Indians are really a very significant presence. Okay, the rest of the country in South Asia, you don't really need to talk much about the Indians. Okay. Okay, so how do you use the Chinese and the Indians? Essentially, right, my advice to you is only one. When you say alien Asians, right, that means they do not belong to the indigenous group. They are foreign Asians, okay, that come to South Asia. So if possible, right, if possible, okay, unless it is relevant to your essay argument, just like in Singapore's example, I want you all to keep these Chinese or Indian examples, right, to maximum one case study in your entire essay. I want your essays to focus on indigenous minorities, okay? I want you all to focus on indigenous minorities, not the alien Asians. Okay, all right? Okay, and last thing, okay, last 1 minute, very simple. Okay, I already answered most of this question. So this last question is, which method to promote national unity is the most successful? Okay, this answer I really need to give. There's no proven method. Okay, rather there's no method that is most successful. Both assimilation and multiculturalism can work effectively depending on the local context and circumstances of each country. Okay, next week we are going to do an essay question on this, okay, where we will need to really think about, actually, right, both assimilation and multiculturalism, they are both valid and viable national unity approaches. You do not try not to use your biasness as a Singaporeans to look at the two approaches and think that assimilation cannot work. Okay, that's not true, because obviously most countries employ assimilation. Okay, so I want you to bear this in mind as we end the lesson today. Okay, there's no right or wrong answer. Both approaches are equally valid. Okay, thank you.